we'll make a start. We are recording some of the sessions for today, just so colleagues know and are aware. So we will still have colleagues joining us, but perhaps we'll make a start. So if we want to stop sharing the slides, Shanice, that'd be really helpful. Okay, so officially welcome to our very first Aurora Alumni Conference. This is an absolutely fantastic day, and wherever you're joining us from, whichever part of the UK and Ireland and perhaps beyond you are joining us from, you are hugely welcome. And it's fantastic for us to A, have you all here, and B, to have got to this point, A, 10 years down the line, which is a fantastic achievement, and secondly, to have got to this point of pulling together our alumni. And this is our first of these events, and we'll talk more about what more is coming your way a little later in the day. Yes, the session's being recorded, and yes, we'll definitely make sure it's available to everyone afterwards. And I hope that everyone is comfortable. I hope, as I said earlier, you're all safe, dry and warm. If your garden sheds are probably not. Okay, so really warm welcome to everyone, and thanks to everybody who's helped put the day together. For those of you who do not know me, and I don't know everyone, and you probably don't all know me, my name is Tracy Bell-Reeves, and I'm Executive Director here at Advanced HE for Delivery, Knowledge and Quality. And Aurora is one of the very many things that sit in my responsibilities, and I have a great team that we work with who work on both the core Aurora and now our new alumni offer as well. I'm immensely proud to be associated with Aurora, and I have been for some time, and I'll talk a little bit more about my own story later. So we've made a slight adjustment in the programme today. I'm going to hand over shortly to Alison and Lillian. We've brought them forward slightly, so I'll just say a little by way of introduction, and then I'll hand over. Alison and Lillian will have the interview, and then I'll close that session with a few more words afterwards. Before I do that, I just want to go through a few practical notes for the day. So thank you, Shanice. I think we've got a slide with some bullet points on around housekeeping. So first of all, absolutely great to see you. Appreciate for some people, they perhaps would prefer not to have their cameras on, so make your own choices around that, but it would certainly be great for colleagues to be able to see you, certainly in the breakout sessions. If you've got technical difficulties today, then please do find Shanice and the team through the Aurora alumni email. Contact them and they will endeavour to resolve it for you. We do have the chat function. We have a lot of you here today, which is absolutely fantastic. So we would prefer if we can try and keep the chat around relevant points from the speakers that you'll hear from and from the breakout sessions and conversations. But if you do have particular questions and you want to use that mechanism, that's fine, but bear with us because there's a lot happening and a lot of you. We'll try to answer questions as we go. But if we are not able to, then please bear with us, as I say, and we'll get back to you later, or equally, please do just drop us an email. Again, as I said, there are many of you, and you are from the many cohorts of Aurora across the 10 years that we have been running Aurora. Around 70 cohorts in total, there or thereabouts. So some of you, this will be a reconnection after a quite significant period of time, I guess. For some of you, it's a less a shorter interaction, shall we say, between when you last participated in Aurora and today. And for some of you, you will be with cohort colleagues that you were with before, and some of you will be with new colleagues. So please do make the most of those connections. When you meet in your breakout groups, introduce each other, say where you're from, which cohort you were in, and where you are working now, which may not necessarily be where you were at the time you did Aurora. So take those opportunities to connect and reconnect and meet colleagues and share your updates and your stories. We do have live captioning through the day, and we also do have frequent breaks, which we factored in to facilitate some colleagues who particularly benefit from that. So what I would ask you is to respect the breaks. They are frequent, but equally, we'd like you to make sure that you do come back to the programme at the right time. So just keep an eye on the clock and hopefully get the time to make the tea and coffee that's going to sustain us all through this absolutely wonderful autumn day. Okay, so that's all to kick us off. I'm now going to hand over to Alison and Lillian, and I'm hugely grateful to Lillian for stepping in to be part of the first session today. So Alison Johns is our Chief Executive at Advanced HE and was previously Chief Executive at the Leadership Foundation. and has had a very long-standing connection with Aurora way back from when it began back in 2013. Alison created the Leadership Foundation in a different role that she had, and then came in as chief executive and had responsibility for Aurora and has been with it throughout its lifespan so far. Lillian is one of our 22-23 alumni. She graduated last year, and she's currently based at Mary Immaculate College in Ireland. And we thought this was a wonderful opportunity to kind of bridge between 2013 and 2023 and have a conversation that bridges across that 10-year span. So thank you both. And I think I am now handing over to Lillian. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Do we have Alison? I don't seem to find her here. Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, Alison. It's incredible to be here today. We had the opportunity to chat before today. And as you know, I took part in one of the most recent cohorts of the Aurora Women's Leadership Program. That indeed was something I very much enjoyed, and I feel personally that I gained a lot from in terms of leadership perspectives, confidence, and skills. So let's go back, Alison, to where it all started. It's a long time ago now, but could you describe for us how the program was conceived and what the need was that you identified that Advanced HE sought to address through Aurora?
Absolutely, Lillian, and it's wonderful to be talking with you here today, but also virtually meeting so many people who have made Aurora. Actually, you've made Aurora, all of you attending today and other colleagues, what it is. So Aurora was initiated actually in response to a piece of groundbreaking research conducted by Professor Louise Morley. In those days, the Leadership Foundation used to commission pieces of research from the sector, and it was called Absences and Aspirations. And that research really identified the lack of progression and recognition for women in the higher education workforce. And it proposed a series of actions to address this. I think the key three things were leadership development for women in higher education, capacity building programs, but doing it at scale. And I think that was the key point here. And we certainly have 10 years and 10,000 alumni. That's what I call scale, to create that capacity and impact, and then mentoring. So those were the three ingredients. And we felt at the Leadership Foundation there was a real opportunity here to create that and build that community across higher education. And my goodness, it's so fantastic to see that we have a community of 10,000. And our aim was really to advance leadership opportunities for women. So that was where it came from, Lillian.
And I have to add to that, Alison, that research is an incredible piece of knowledge. It was published in 2013, wasn't it? And the full title is Women and Higher Education Leadership, Absences and Aspirations. Yes. It's a great read for any woman, anybody out there who wants to find details of what Aurora has done and why it did this. But again, Alison, here we are with this groundbreaking report that details the lack of progression and recognition for women in higher education. To what extent do you feel these needs still exist, or better still, or have they changed or transmuted in any way?
Okay, I think that's a really good question to ask, and it's a bit like leadership in itself. It's a never finished project. So let's be positive, because we can be positive. You know, we've made great progress since 10 years ago. And I started on this journey at a national level in 2003 when I joined HEFGE. And for 10 years, women vice chancellors flatlined at about 17 a year. Each year, they're still stuck at 17. And it was very interesting that in 2013, 10 years on from that, when Aurora kicked in and the Athena Swan, let's not forget Athena Swan as well, that's when we began to see the steep incline of women becoming in more and more into senior leadership roles. And if you look at the latest HESA data, the 2022 data, it shows that 32% of higher education institutions are now led by women. So I don't know how many institutions that is, but when we had only 17 female vice chancellors. That was running at about 11% or something. So if you use a similar figure, we've got to have 45 towards 50 women now leading institutions. And if you look at the 5 highest level of posts that HESA counts, women now account for 40% in those roles. Now, of course, these figures are they're both great, but we want 50% in all of them. And we also recognise that we need more women of colour and more diversity across all protected characteristics for professors, senior roles and heads of institutions. So there's plenty of work to be done, but today is about celebration and things have really significantly moved on. And that's down to everybody's hard work, actually. And women being more confident. And we'll talk a little bit more about what Aurora does for women later on, I know.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that today is about celebration. Yes, it is 10 years.
Yeah.
And we're talking what? You mentioned 10,000 plus women in higher
Yes.
education that have taken part in Aurora. As you reflect on this idea, how would you characterize its impact on both individual women and the sector as a whole?
Yes, and I think it's right to look at it through both of those lenses, actually. So we have done quite a lot, as you would expect, evaluation around the impact of Aurora. And we know that for individual women, through those evaluations and the stories that we hear and the feedback that we get, that it makes a real difference. It really does. And so what do I mean by that? Women say it's been life-changing for them. And importantly, around the outcomes that matter for them. And that could be about work, but it can also be about home. It can be about their careers. It's how they balance life, work, you know, having a baby, writing a book. Gosh, where do I go? How do I solve this problem? Well, Aurora helps women through to find solutions which are right for them, where they get the best of both worlds. And we also know that after Aurora, women report that 85% of women have reported an increase in confidence in their leadership capability and ability. And I think a lot of this is because actually it was latent, but Aurora helped them to recognize their leadership skills. And leadership is about, you know, being the best you can be in leadership. And, you know, it's about developing that latent talent that we have. But I also think what's important is in a recent, the 22, your cohort actually, that since completing it, 42% of participants had gone on to propose new strategies in their institutions. So being very proactive about leading institutional change. Over a third had shared learning with colleagues, so taking the responsibility for cascading the learning and bringing other women on. And 20% have been promoted to a senior post. That's in one cohort alone. So this is the kind of impact for individuals, but you can also see the benefits for institutions and all of that. Because I think what Aurora does for institutions is it really helps institutions with their gender equality plans. And also impact, and it creates communities for women who can advocate and support others. So it's a kind of snowballing of great things, really, and a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the whole intention originally was about building critical mass and momentum for change, and we've got the evidence to see that happening in practice now.
Yeah, when you talk about evidence, Alison, are there any specific studies that show the impact of Aurora and the perception of participants? And may I just add in there too, that how clear and confident are you on its impact based on available data?
All right. Yes, well, for me, having data and evidence base for what we do is absolutely important, because there are two things. Why would institutions want to invest in something unless we know it works? And actually, if we don't have something that works, if we don't know that it works, I feel like we're leading people up the garden path. And one of our values at Advanced HE is integrity. So evidence is part of operating in a way with integrity for me, because people invest a lot of time and effort, institutions invest money. And if we make a promise, we need to deliver on it, and we need to understand that. So there are two main pieces of work I would point us to in terms of evidence. The first piece was we commissioned a 5-year independent longitudinal study. And I think that really shows the commitment. And we tracked a cohort of over 3,000 women post their Aurora attendance and what their journey was. And this concluded in 2021. So some of you today may well have been part of that longitudinal study. And one of the things that I'm known for quoting, and in fact, I think people get fed up with hearing me say this, but I think it's so important, is that women who'd been on Aurora are twice as likely to get promoted and achieve progression, whether that's the academic colleagues or professional services colleagues, twice as likely to get promoted if you've been on Aurora. And I also think the impact on women's confidence and their leadership was also shown to be very significant. So that, I think, speaks volumes. And last year we took an alumni survey, and around 270 women, I think it was, took part in that. And oh, sorry, I do have to have a few notes for these figures because I can't hold them all in my head, but I really want to share them with you because I think they're important. Over 2/3 of the respondents had applied for promotion since completing Aurora. And do you know what? 83% were successful. I just think that speaks for itself, and that's fantastic. We want women to be successful. Also, interestingly, over 70% of respondents said that their earnings had increased either slightly or significantly. You know, and whilst money isn't everything in the world, I think we know that, it's a very important marker of recognition, value, esteem, a lot of the things. And if we're serious about closing the gender pay gap, then this is what we need to see. So 2 really important studies there, and we are constantly hungry for evidence, also to know what works so we can make it better.
When you throw us the statistics, I am thinking about the women that are present right now in this conference. And I'm wondering, how true is this? Does it represent them? But you know yourself, Alison, that in 10 short years, the world of higher education has changed considerably. Could you, in that light, share with us your thoughts on the key changes that have taken place in the sector during that time, and perhaps more specifically about the changes that have taken place in terms of women's visibility and participation in the sector?
Oh, you're quite, I mean, there have been massive changes in the last 10 years, including a new Higher Education Act in 2017, which really transformed the face of higher education and how we operate. And that in itself, along with the global financial crisis, geopolitical unrest, etc., has created a hugely challenging environment for university leadership. And you know what really makes the leadership of universities work at its best is diversity. And so to see more women coming into leadership roles, I know, I just see that universities are better led and better managed as a consequence of that. We get more creativity, we get all those different perspectives. But if I'm focusing particularly on what we're here to talk about today, we now see 50% participants on our top management programs, women. You know, in the early days, it was difficult to achieve that, although we had it as a target. It's now just the norm. We're seeing more female chairs of boards. We're seeing much better representation of women on governing bodies, 40% and more. Again, we want to see 50%. And we are also seeing more visible diversity generally. And do you know what? When it's not visible, we call it out nowadays. And I think that's the big difference. We're not shy, we're not frightened to call it out. And that's what we must continue to do.
Just as you're speaking, I'm getting some feedback there in the chat. Louise from Republic of Ireland, she's agreeing with you. And then we have St. Andrews and Leeds as well. They're all agreeing with you. So it seems to be factual that change is happening.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. But this next question is particularly very interesting to me. You know, we sometimes in Aurora hear concerns that women's leadership programs aim to fix women rather than tackle systemic gender bias. What is your view on that?
I am really passionate about this, okay? Because, you know, I am very aware, and I constantly say this, that training courses on their own have limited impact. I mean, they may be interesting. Intrinsically, you may get value because you learn things, but there is no point in taking a person out of their organization, training them up. They get motivated, they got great ideas, they want to go back, they can change the world, but they go back in, and the people above haven't changed, the people at the side and the people below haven't changed. And after 6 to 8 weeks, I think it is, you know, all that motivation, it's you know, it's dissolved because you can't change anything on your own. And this is why designed Aurora in the way that we did, which is, and Louise Morley actually raised this in her report, which is there has to be structural scaffolding or framework within the institution to support systemic change. So we have Aurora champions, and there'll be many here today, and thank you for doing that. And they have to be at the top table or at the senior level in the organisation. The university has to provide opportunities for Aurorans to get together to create that community, to build that community and advocacy for change. Mentors need to be provided, and what's so great about Aurorans is they go on to mentor other women. And also, you know, where it's done really well, institutions, and I'm a great advocate and I really push for this, and it has to be really part of the Aurora package. It's about giving the women on Aurora during their period a leadership experience. It could be shadowing the head of department, it could be shadowing the whole promotion process, it could be, you know, to understand, it's about demystifying leadership. And different institutions, you know, it could be sitting through research grant evaluation panels. It could be whatever is relevant to the individual. But by going through that, I think it demystifies a lot about what leadership is. And if you look at Aurora alongside Athena Swan, which is specifically designed to tackle structural barriers, it's a very powerful interconnection there. So I don't apologize that Aurora is a personal development program, because we do need to develop individuals, but it's also got the wraparound of tackling the system within which those individuals have to work as well.
It looks to me there that women are very accomplished, Alison. But tell us, as women and as Aurorans, what more could or should we be doing in that systemic space to create more equal playing field?
Well, I think the thing I would say is this very much about working together, using the collective strength, that critical mass to create momentum for change. And I think if you're responsible for Aurora in an institution, either as somebody who drives the process or in a champion, get men involved. Australia are particularly good. They had a special initiative, and I was trying to remember it this morning, but it escapes my mind. But it's about getting men being sponsors, advocating for women, you know, get them mentoring, involve them in Aurora meetings, you know, invite them in to tackle systemic changes. And if you want to look at a really good example of how this works, Sir David Bell, who's Vice Chancellor at Sunderland University, is very supportive of his Aurora network. Get your VC to come and talk to the Aurora network, you know, have a dialogue between the two of you. And if your institution is undertaking Athena Swan, get involved with that as well. And it's through that collective power and strength, I think, that we can really, you know, move the dial again on all of this.
And just to say that also, Athena Swan is very strong in Ireland, as you know, and Mary Immaculate, where I'm from, is highly represented there. And I heard what you talked there about men being part of our journey. And just to say also that women are not a homogeneous group, right? And we all have different ambitions, challenges, and concerns, as well as our own intersectionalities. To what extent do you feel Aurora, as it is currently delivered, caters to those differences?
Do you know, this is such an important point, because people will always make that point with regards to our race equality charter, but seldom do they say that in relation to women. You know, it's not just a 50-50. We are definitely not a homogenous group, and I'd be the first to fly the flag for that. But you know, the really kind of, I think, pivotal learning moment for us came from the pandemic, because everything went online, and we had that light bulb moment, which was, my gosh, this is immensely helpful for women with disabilities, women with caring responsibilities, with a range of, you know, different characteristics or needs. And I think we also learned from the pandemic about how, actually, despite doing things online, there were some challenges. It actually allowed for greater inclusivity. You know, the hands up, more people got the chance to speak, whether it's in the chat, whereas in other meetings, you all sit there, you know, silent, trying to get a way in. And so there were lots of very positive things. And we've seen far wider engagement and more diverse engagement over the past 3 years since we've been using the online approach. And I think what's also, this has sort of sparked something else, is look, we all know institutions are committed to this, or on this journey, because they all take part in it, but some are better at inclusivity than others, and perhaps women who don't fit the traditional mode, whatever that is, but come to us and say, how do I get onto Aurora, because I'm not included, particularly so trans women or other women who identify in different ways, so we can then help the institution to think about how they broaden up and are more inclusive in who's actually embraced into the Aurora fold. So we've learned a lot from that, and I think those are some of the things that we're trying to do. Always more work to be done, and particularly I think for women of colour, but we're committed to do so, and it's it's a piece of work again to keep on tackling.
I see a lot of chats coming through with a lot of engagement.
Yes.
People from women from LGBT, and I think that's just great. If we have time, we can collect loads of this, and maybe we can ask you these questions, Alison. But you touched on women from minority background. I give you an example. As a non-native Irish in my country here in Ireland, I must say I felt I had a different journey to make in terms of feeling comfortable in my space alongside my Aurora cohort. Among the studies that you mentioned earlier, is there any data that reflects the specific experiences of women from maybe Black and minority ethnic backgrounds, and if Aurora is as effective for them?
Yes, our alumni survey last year did show that we need to do more in regard to this. And we are seeing some evidence now that there are systemic issues within institutions which prohibit progress for this group more than others. And we do more work beyond Aurora and Athena. This one, we have our race equality charter. We do a lot of work with institutions on race, and I think what it's done is shine the spotlight on that for us and saying, okay, how do we bring these together? How do we join up our work, and how do we become more strategic? And then how, on a practical level, do we just help institutions themselves to really seriously look at this? I mean, I am so pleased with the take up of the race equality charter, and hearing vice chancellors saying when they didn't know I was in the room or on the call, just what a difference it's making to how they're thinking about race and minority staff, and so I take that as very pleasing. Again, more work to be done, but I think what we're looking at now is what can we do with our alumni offer? How can we work more closely with champions to support them with this? And we have seen more diverse participation, and we've got lots of positive stories to tell. So I think what we need to do is showcase some of those stories so that people can see people like themselves more and understand that. So there's more work to be done, definitely. But it's something that's really come into close focus for us now.
I'm just going to push you a little bit further on that question. Does that point to any rethink or development work that you might do in the future?
Yes, it's very much on the top of our agenda, and I'd like to make a plea. If there's anybody out there who would like to work on this with us and has specific expertise or case studies or stories that would be of help, we'd love to hear from you. So this is an open invitation. Please do get in contact, and I think probably either put it in the chat or send it to the Aurora alumni email, and we will scoop that together, and then we can take that forward.
Yeah, 317 persons right here on this forum. I hope that you will get all text messages. But there is one question that really caught me. One Aurora participant told me that her key take out from the program was that leadership for her meant understanding people's why. In other words, she had to understand what motivated them in order to get them on board with an initiative or change project. What are the key takeouts you'd like to see women take from Aurora?
Well, I think my top key takeout I'd like to see for women who've been on Aurora is be confident and believe in yourself. God, I wish I'd done that myself when I was younger. The biggest barrier to my progression is lack of self-confidence, holding myself back. And so that believing in yourself, be confident and taking risks. If you go for something, you don't get it, it doesn't matter. I'm a great believer, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen for the right reasons. Something else will come along. And I can tell you something else has always come along for me, which was better than what I thought I wanted. So it was just a personal story. And I suppose that's really about dealing with any imposter syndrome or feelings that you might have. Also, you know, I hope Aurora take out is knowing that whatever you face, someone else has faced it out there somewhere else, and there's always someone who can share their experience and their story. You know, we still know that women look at a job advert and think, oh, I can only do 50% and won't apply for it. Well, you know, give it a go, because you just don't know what's going to happen, and if it doesn't happen, what can you learn from it? And I suppose the other thing is to really make this work in the spirit in which Aurora's attended. A take-up would be to encourage you to become mentors, take on leadership roles, set up a group or a network so that you continue the good work.
I can't believe that at any point in your life you lacked confidence. I am very surprised. Very surprised. Yeah, that brings me up to another question. Aurora didn't exist when you were at your formative stage of your career. What was the biggest learning point you took from your formative years, which maybe you had to learn the hard way?
Yeah. Learning the hard way, definitely. I remember, you know, it was in the late 80s, and I was at somebody's not very senior, middle senior retirement do for a man in the organization I worked in. And I never found him a particularly pleasant person, but I thought it was his retirement. So I made some comment. I said, oh, you know, you must be very proud of what you've achieved, or I don't know, I can't remember exactly what it was. And he said, oh yes, he said, you know, it's been a good career. And he said, you know, been very fortunate, but you know, and he said something to me along the lines of, yes, but you know, I wouldn't get too excited, you know, they don't tend to promote blonde bimbos in the civil service or something like this. He called me a blonde bimbo. Could you I mean, yes, it was the late 1980s. It was yeah. And I just, you know, he made me so cross and so angry. I think that was the drive that really drove me through in my career. And that was the worst example of a put down. But you know, being put down in so many different ways. I used to feel with some male managers, they put me in a box, put the lid down, sat on it, and they were cooking there because they wanted me to do this kind. I was doing a good job, and they wanted me to carry on doing that good job for them. When I was at things were at the best for me, it's when I had men, and they were male sponsors. I did have one woman chief executive who was, God, she was a hard taskmaster, but I learned a lot from her. But male sponsors who spotted my potential and encouraged me and pushed me. And I never forget Sir Alan Langlands, when he was the chief executive for Hefke. He was a great leader. I went in to see him and I said, oh God, I've been asked by the Australian government to lead this big review of teaching and learning enhancement. And I said, I don't know what to do. He said, go, do it. I said, yeah, but you know, I'll be on the other side of the world and what? He said, oh, for goodness sake, Alison. He said, yeah. And actually said it's more about governance and funding that they need, but you'll be able to do it. You'll be absolutely fine. Best thing I ever did. So it was me who was stopping me going, but you know, he encouraged me. But other men who sponsored me in my career actually were really, really important. Yeah. And so I suppose if there's a moral in that story, it goes back to believing in yourself, you know, but the value of sponsorship, do not underestimate that. And, you know, if you can sponsor women, I try to, whenever I can, sponsor women if they need it, if they ask it, or if I see somebody, you know, where that might help. But I think those are the key points. And I've just suddenly realised the time. I've loved being here, but I have to dash off to another appointment. So I'm really sorry to go. Have a fantastic day, everybody. And Lillian, thank you for being star.
Thank you so much. And can we all please just unmute and give Alison a big round of applause for the incredible work that she's been doing. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you to all.
Thank you so much.
As well. Have a great day, everybody. I look forward to hearing all about it. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Alison. You've been phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lillian, and thank you, Alison. Thank you, Lillian. That was incredible. So yeah, let's say thanks to Lillian as well, because she really put herself out there. And I know before she was having a dose of imposter syndrome, which she absolutely didn't need to have. So thank you, Lillian. Well done. Well done. Okay, so thank you for that. And we've got a short break in a few minutes, but I just kind of want to draw out a few points from that conversation, which really resonated with me. So, I mean, I think recognition that yes, we have made progress. It's a common question that we get asked. Aurora of itself alone and Athena Swan alone are not going to address all of the challenges. But absolutely, there has been progress, and we can visibly see that through visibility of executive roles and key leadership roles, and in other spaces. But we know that there is more work to do. So, and yeah, it was a great session. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think finding solutions and accessing that. I saw a couple of comments there about experiences that women have had about comments passed on by male colleagues. My daughter is absolutely excellent at flipping it back. So I went to the theatre with her recently. A guy at the bar was said a quite inappropriate comment, and she's very good at kind of taking it and throwing it back. So if a male colleague is saying something to you along the lines of, you know, how are you finding it being here as a woman? How are you finding it being here as a man? Because there's no difference. So I think let's speak up, speak out. And on that point of getting men involved, absolutely, definitely. I think a common misconception often is that in terms of mentoring, we can't have men. But absolutely we can, and certainly when we have had advanced HE Aurorans, we have had male colleagues who have also mentored some of our female participants. So definitely roll sleeves up, get men involved. So I just want to talk a little bit, just to share that, just a little bit around the Aurora story and that pride. So a bit like Alison, you know, started as a graduate myself, and I was very fortunate. I worked for a guy called Peter Webber, who set up quite a few well-known brands, still going today. Some of them may not be your brand of choice, but they're still there. Great supporter of women's leadership, and he sent me to the first women's leadership program run by a company called Springboard, and some of you may have heard of Springboard. I'm sure you have. Nowhere near as good as Aurora. It was the very first one, but that experience was hugely transformative for me. And so we know the power of the transformative experience of something like Aurora, and we know what difference it can make. So, and we see that, we hear it through the delegates who attend Aurora, through the champions who support Aurora, through executive leaders and senior leaders, and others in many other spaces who talk about that transformative power. So you're really collectively really part of something. But I think there is something that, particularly as you're an alumni community, that last point, which was a great question, Lillian, about how can we all get involved and do more, there is something about paying it back. So if you have the opportunity and you have already been proactive and you've set up something in your institution that's really created and made a difference, please let us know. And if you haven't considered stepping into the mentor space, or if you haven't considered taking perhaps the lead in setting up a network or something akin to that, certainly would advocate you to do that. So that was transformative for me. And then years later, I became deputy HR director at university. And one of the things I was tasked to do was to take responsibility for initiatives around gender equality, women's leadership progression. I got an email out the blue from something called the Leadership Foundation about a new initiative called Aurora, and looking for volunteers to go and help be role models. So I actually, as it happens, ended up being at the very first cohort, the very first module of the very first cohort in London, with around, I think, 50 women, 50, 60 women, something like that. So that's how it began, and look at where we are now. We have just, well, we're not quite closed, Sarah McSorley, are we? But we're still looking for people for this year. But we have got 1,640 bookings for Aurora for this year in the quickest amount of time we've ever had. So there's definitely value appreciation for Aurora. There's a real demand and a real appetite to be part of something, and a need for us to really continue that good work. So I took Aurora back into my university role and set it up there. And I came across a very reluctant woman who really didn't feel that something like Aurora was going to help her, but was looking for how she could unlock her own potential. And I'm sure she won't mind me sharing her story. That person was Suzanne O'Brien. Some of you will know Suzanne. Suzanne now, some years later, she did undertake Aurora. She found it hugely transformative for herself, and is now one of our lead facilitators on Aurora. And she will be with you this afternoon in one of the workshops. And her story really represents the opportunity, I think, that sits around Aurora. I then left the university sector, came, not sector, but the university, and came to Leadership Foundation, and now responsible for Aurora on a national basis, and international with Ireland. And now we are looking to progress even further, and colleagues will talk a little bit about that later. But one particular area that we're looking for this year is to take Aurora into international spaces. In particular, we're looking at launching a program in Australia, pilot program this year, we hope, and potentially some in part of Europe possibly around the Mediterranean region, and possibly in India, and also looking at Middle East. And I think if in 5 years' time we have another gathering together of our Aurora alumni, it would be great if there is a global Aurora alumni. And I think bringing that kind of global insight and global connections to Aurora will really further advance and support women in different ways. So we're really quite excited about that. So I hope that's been a really interesting kickoff session. I hope you've enjoyed it. Huge thanks again to Alison and to Lillian, sorry, apologies. We're going to take a very short break now for 5 minutes, and then when we return, Fiona Lennox-Smith will introduce the next session with our panel, which I'm really looking forward to. So take a break, have a cuppa, see you in 5 minutes. Thank you.